Anna, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to be here with you, Peter.
Yeah, great being here with you too. Thanks so much for taking out the time today and speaking with us about your journey through real estate investing and what you've done through this very illustrious career in real estate. I would say, especially after hearing you. So, without further ado, would you be able to give our audience a little bit background on how you got into real estate investing, how long you've been into it, and kind of tell them a little bit about your story?
Sure. So I'll try to give you the short and sweet version, and I'll let you ask me questions to go further back. But I bought my very first real estate investment in 1999. So it's been about 22 years. But I didn't really get real serious about investing the first time until about 2007. And then after the Great Recession, during the crash of the economy, real estate business, the stock market, just about everything, I realized that what I thought was a really safe career and job, and entrepreneurship were really much less safe than my real estate investments. And it was kind of that event that opened my eyes to getting really, really serious about creating financial freedom through real estate and not just using it as a tool to create, wealth long term down the road. So I started out in Bank of America. I was in their private bank department back in 1997 through 99. And I started learning about investments and how to create wealth, really more grow wealth and sustain wealth more than on the wealth creation side. And then I went to work for AIG. So I worked in a department where we created hedge fund wrapped investments, insurance investments. And hedge funds were basically like souped up mutual funds in all kinds of different things. And so I learned a lot about what the very wealthy do with their money, but I really
Hmm.
didn't ever know, how do I create my own wealth and how do I become wealthy aside from just slowly, setting aside money in my retirement accounts until, one day I retired. And when I had my first child back in 2003, I, for the first time, really thought, I just want to be home with my kiddo. Like, I don't want
Yeah,
to work a full-time job and keep driving up this corporate ladder while my kids are little. How can I replace a six-figure income and spend more time with my kids? And
yeah,
so real estate and flipping in particular was the first thing that I decided to try to do to replace my income. First flip didn't go so well. My husband said, "We're never going to do that again." That was from 2007, 6 to 2007. And then we moved to Pennsylvania to start his business. And when we moved to Pennsylvania, we had had two small rentals and we had flipped a property. And at that point, I found this little property where my husband could practice in the corporate space on the bottom of this main street in a small town. And it had some apartments above it and behind it. And I thought, it might be smart to just take on these renters and have a less expensive lease payment, by owning the property on our own. So we became landlords in Pennsylvania really by necessity, just to kind of make a safe financial move, not because
yeah,
we were thinking we're going to be full-time real estate investors. Fast forward
yeah.
several years, that aha moment after the Great Recession, and I decided to go full throttle into buying as much rental real estate as I could. And I started buying up small multifamily real estate properties, mostly 4-unit apartment buildings, and
Okay.
did that for several years. Created the financial freedom, left AIG about 2.5 years ago, retired after 20 years there. And now I've invested in about 2,000 doors as a general partner in real estate, and I'm a full-time multifamily real estate investor.
Nice, nice. That, like I mentioned, very inspiring stories. So going back to you guys moving and then you having um, I would say a very small experience on, having two rentals and then doing one flip and then moving to Pennsylvania to a new area. How hard was that for confidence? And then also, how hard was that for you to pick up an area that you may have known? Did you know much about the area before you guys
No,
moved? Okay.
culture
Um,
shock.
yeah, yeah. So how was it? Especially trying to know that market after a while and then jump into it after only, let's just say, having those just three investments.
Yeah, it was hard. I went from Houston, Texas, a city, a very, very large city, almost about to overtake Chicago as the third largest city in the country, and moved to this little town of 7,000 people. And, it was literally one lane each direction, what they called, major major
Yeah.
highways. So it was pretty culture shock. And I we came here for my husband to start his chiropractic business, and he's from this town, so he knew it
Okay.
really well.
Yeah.
Um, I didn't know as much as I knew about, economics and investments. I really didn't know a ton about market research. I just said, well, this is where we're moving, and we're going to need to take a step back in order to move forward, right? We sold a big house in Texas. We sold our rental property and our flip property, and we moved in with his parents for a year to
Mm.
figure out where we wanted to be. Because I said, I'm not buying a house in a little bitty town until I know what I'm getting myself into. So that was a
Yeah.
big step back, and some fear that came with how are we going to navigate this. We had two small kids. They were
Yeah.
3 years old and 10 months old. And we decided, let's buy this building because it has tenants, it can help pay for it. And it was a high traffic visibility location for his practice. So we're like, it's a good location for the business, and it happens to come along with tenants. So I didn't know anything about the tenant demographic and how likelihood they were to pay, how many jobs were in the area, whether the schools and crime were good. I did call the police department and found out it was a very low crime area, and parents said
Yeah.
the schools were decent. But that's about all I knew when I first, got into let's buy our first rental property. And so
Yeah.
we bought because it was close. And then we bought another one. We decided, let's house hack. Let's buy a 4-unit apartment building. I saw one for sale. And after about a year of being here, I was like, it's pretty nice having these tenants that pay for things. Not quite ready to buy the house. Let's just buy this 4-unit. We'll live here a year or two, and we'll learn to become better landlords, and then eventually we'll keep it as a rental property. So that was, there was fear there, but I had the courage and the desire to be home with my kiddo enough that I
Yeah.
said, I'm willing to do whatever it takes to kind of take a step back, make some wise financial decisions that just cover our needs. And at that point, my job at AIG was a very temporary try working from home. We're not sure it's going to work out, but we'll let you try.
Hmm.
So I was just trying to cover our living expenses in case I lost my job, in case his business didn't go well. And rental properties was a way for me to do that, not some great, market research that I had done.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, especially I was going to ask, okay, well, how did you guys go back? I mean, so you're moving around, doing life, and then you had to go backwards, take a couple of steps back to get to, the 10 steps forward that you wanted to be at, right? So
Yes.
you moved in with the in-laws and you were able to do that and then also save some money and then you house hacked. So I would assume you guys probably, owned a home or at least like rented a nice home in Houston when you were there. Um,
Yes.
and then, there's got to be obviously a why to what the madness is. And I could see obviously with your kids and your family to get back to a place where you ultimately later down the road can retire from a full-time
Yes.
job. So,
Yes. Yeah,
so that's,
it was
that's
really
huge.
that compelling why, and we all have to have that, right? Because you can say, "I wanna be a real estate investor," or, "I wanna create wealth," but if it's just for the money, when it gets hard and requires sacrifice, you're gonna give up too easily, right? Because
Yes.
it's not easy. It's not super complicated, but it's not easy, and for
Yeah.
us, we took a lot of steps back because I wanted so desperately to be home with my kids. And I was like, I can make a lot of money in the future, but I only have these couple of years that I can be with them, pour into them. And, I was very, very driven person and very career driven until I had my kids. But they changed my perspective. And so I was willing to do whatever it took and make whatever sacrifices I needed to for a few years just to make our ends meet so that I didn't need that big job. And then, over time, the challenges got even greater. We started a business at the height of the economy in 2007 with
Hmm.
$700,000 in startup debt. Now, that
Yeah.
included the building and an
Hmm.
SBA loan and equipment loans and really one income, which was mine. So I
Yeah.
had to keep working through that. And then when the Great Recession hit, it just completely blindsided us. And I lost 2/3 of my 401k in the 2009 financial crisis, which was all I really had left because we had sold our big house and everything else.
Hmm.
And I was told AIG was going under, look for another job. And, I didn't know what else to do.
Yeah.
But I knew I wanted to be home with my kids. And so I just kept taking the next step, one step at a time, and committing that however long it takes, I'm going to make slow, methodical decisions, that get us in a better place tomorrow, to make work more and more optional.
So you were doing flips too as you guys were house hacking. Is that correct?
Well, we flipped in Texas. When we
Okay.
came to Pennsylvania, what we I had read no books on real estate investing. And let me just tell
Hmm.
you, you go through a financial advisory training, you sit with, very wealthy clients and they never talk to you about real estate. Ever, ever, ever. Your clients might tell you, and I had a few say, "Ha ha ha, you can make me 10%. I make much more than that in real estate." But that's the only thing I ever heard about real estate. Like, you're not trained
Yeah.
about real estate. So I knew nothing about real estate other than if I make my property nicer, I can probably get better rents and I can probably get better people. So I better find a book on real estate. And I read one real estate book, and that was Multifamily Millions by Dave Lindahl. And
Okay.
I read
Heard
that
of it.
book and went, "Oh my goodness, like, I could actually make not just enough to cover my living expenses, but if I do this and start to learn to force appreciation," which is basically like a flip on steroids, because 'cause you're
Hmm.
basically just going in and you're raising the insides, you're putting in capital expenses to improve the property inside and out, raising the rents that you can get accordingly. And because you're creating a higher income every month, it's forcing the value of that property up. So I learned the beauty of forced appreciation. And I couldn't get loans though, Peter. That was my problem. I mean, I worked for a company that was in the news every day that it was going to go under.
Yeah.
They knew I was one of the only work from home employees. And my husband had a brand new business with $700,000 in debt. So I was not a good loan risk, right?
And
Um,
they changed all the requirements at that time anyways, so
everything.
yeah, that is just 3 to 4-fold on top of what you were trying to deal with already.
Exactly. And so, it was one hurdle after another, after another. And so not only did I have no more money to keep investing, to even keep flipping, hard money lenders, I had heard about them, but they were all going out of business. Real estate
Hmm.
was crashing all over the country. So there were very few lenders, even private lenders, that were interested in investing, lending to you to buy real estate. And the banks all said no. So I really didn't know how to get more money to flip. So we said, let's just concentrate on the units that we have. Let's slowly learn to put in the sweat equity to make them nicer, slowly raise the rents, and then one day get the banks to let me cash out my equity. So we
Yeah.
slowly and methodically took the 8 units we had, made them nicer, raised the value. And after about 4 years of the bank saying no every time I asked if I could take my equity in, I learned creative financing and I bought some properties from retiring landlords with no, very little down payment, no banks involved. And that gave me the confidence that I could grow without the banks. And I
Hmm.
finally went back to banks and said, okay, now I've got, 16 units. I've made them all worth more. Will you at least give me the equity if I just use them to invest in more properties here locally? And then the
Yeah.
bank started saying yes. And so it was a very slow process of growth for me, Peter. It wasn't like overnight success because every hurdle that I never could have dreamt of stopped me, even though intellectually I knew if I buy big multifamily properties, I can make millions of dollars. Once I read that
Yeah.
book, I just didn't have the way to do it at the time.
Yeah, for sure. So talking to those sellers on seller financing and everything like
Mhm.
that, for one, how did you get that communication linked together? Did you send letters? Did you, phone, give them a phone call? Did you know about them just because you knew them in the town? How'd you find out about them?
So, I had a couple of years where it was just like real estate's impossible,
Hmm.
entrepreneurship's impossible. I guess I'll just keep working till I get laid off because somehow by the grace of God I never got laid off, right? And I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. But I was really on an island. I didn't know anyone else in my area that did real estate. The few people that I met in this little small town that did real estate were retiring and they wanted out because things were really tough at the time. And so
Yeah.
I remembered that a few years before when I first came to Pennsylvania, I went to some local meetup group and I thought, I guess I better go back to this meetup group, see if they're still there, because I don't know anybody to even tell me how I can still do real estate when I don't have any money.
Hmm.
So I decided to go to a real estate group. And when I looked up local real estate group, I also Googled creative financing. Funny enough, I found a Bigger Pockets post on
Oh
creative
yeah.
financing. And I was like, oh, there's this Bigger Pockets group. Oh, that's really interesting. This is probably 2012, 2013, something like this.
Yeah.
And I read a single post that if you find a retiring landlord, you can structure an installment sale, you can save them their capital gains, pay them interest, and they might be really interested. And I thought, who in the world is going to lend to someone like me? And why in the world would they take payments? Right. So, right about the same time, I went to this meetup group, and this older man stood up and he said, I have a property for sale in the same little small town. And I thought, well, he's older. Maybe he'll do creative financing. So I walked up after that first meetup group and I said, I'm interested. I'm a real estate investor in your area. Would you consider selling on an installment sale? And he goes, yes, I'd consider that. So I was like, okay, wow. The next
Yeah.
day, saw the property, had coffee with him, and we wrote a contract. And he sold it to me on seller financing. And that gave me the confidence to go, this is really possible. And I just did it. Let's try it again.
Yeah.
He told me of another friend that was looking to sell a property on creative financing, and I talked to him. He referred me to another guy who said no, but told me about his friend that wanted to sell and save a capital gains, and I was able to do 2 of them in about a 3-month period.
Oh, nice.
That gave me such a big confidence boost that at the same time that I took those 2 deals down and my bank said yes, that I could use the equity on the other ones I had, I knew that if I just created a plan, I could slowly and methodically, really start to expedite my growth using the equity from these buildings. And from that point, it became much, much, much easier.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny, uh, like you mentioned, there's a lot of people that do real estate and have investments, but like there's not like outside of Bigger Pockets, there's not really anybody that's like, hey, I do, I have 50 units or something like that. And they seem very, very discreet, if you will,
Yes.
about, hey, I have 100 units or I have 175 units or whatever that may be. They don't really ever talk about it, because who knows, maybe they feel like they're embarrassed because they have so many units, or
Yes.
I experienced that for a long time in Orange County. They have quite a bit of meetups, but I what do you think about real estate, that creates people, or doesn't create people, but causes people to feel that way, where they can't really, show off, not show off, but tell people about their real estate.
Yeah, I think, living in a more rural area, there are a lot of older people who own quite a few units. I went to this meetup group and it's funny. This lady came up at the end, she and her sister, and I figured they were in their 70s, somewhere in there. And I don't remember if I spoke that night or I was up there just with the leader of the meetup. And, they came up and he asked, oh, are you interested in real estate? And she's like, mm-hmm. And her sister, elbowed her. And he said, well, do you already own rental properties? And she goes, a few. And her sister elbowed her again, these 2 women in their 70s. And he said, well, what brought you here? And she goes, well, I like to, meet other people that have real estate on occasion. And he said, well, how many units do you have? And she said a few, and her sister said she has 180 units.
Oh, really?
Now, this lady here in central Pennsylvania, you would never knew she was a realtor, right? And she did
Yeah.
say she was a realtor, but she had 180 units. And right afterwards, I went up and said, I want to take you to lunch. I've
Yeah.
never met another female multifamily investor in my area, and certainly not anyone that has 180 units. And so she took me to lunch and she told me her story. She was a teacher who just decided they were going to live on her husband's income and she was going to slowly start buying real estate. And she just kept slowly buying real estate over the many years and bought all of these units. And she didn't want to talk about it. And I didn't ask her, why don't you want to talk about it? But she
Yeah.
just said, you know, there's nothing good about telling somebody everything that you own, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think in talking to older people, because I've worked with investors or their advisors for many, many years, they are much more attuned to lawsuit risk
Mm,
especially in a small town. We don't want everybody to know that we're wealthy because then we're a target, right? To
yeah.
be sued, by unscrupulous people, or someone, trips in the snow and they find out you own a lot, and they're going to go after a lot more. And so I think the older generation, especially, and in smaller areas, there's a real, they don't want to get a reputation of being someone that's very wealthy, because people are going to come and ask them for money, or they're going to sue them for it. So I
Yeah.
see that in the older generation actually a lot. Younger people are like, let's flout everything we do on Facebook. So they don't
Yeah.
mind telling you at all, right? But most
Yeah.
of them don't own a lot of units. Now,
No.
what you see now is they get involved in a syndication, and they, raise money from a few friends, and they, ask someone if they can help them do that. And then they say they own 500 doors, but really
Yeah.
they, raise money from three friends on 500 doors. So what you see now is kind of the opposite, where people claim they have more ownership than what they do. And so I think that smaller town people that we're feeling on an island, they might not know a lot of people that have money, but they feel the
Mm,
pressure and the appearance that everybody's doing deals, and that they don't have enough if they have 20 or 30, because some
yeah.
young guy says he owns 500. So
Hmm.
I find kind of the opposite is really the problem that, more people are dealing with today, where when I was trying to invest a lot, there was nobody other than Bigger Pockets that was talking about what they owned.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point too. I think there is a good amount of the population that doesn't really want to talk about it because liability, those types of things
Mhm.
that they can get involved with. I heard a statistic, and I can't remember what the numbers are, so I won't talk on that. But I know that there's way more billionaires than what they report, just because same thing,
Mhm.
liability.
Mhm.
They're if they live in a different country that's not as safe or something like that, they could be a target and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that don't talk about it. So for you, finding these sellers that are willing to sell to you, which is huge confidence booster, and then also huge just to gain equity to start talking to banks again. What year was that you started getting yeses from the banks versus nos, and bring us up to speed from that point to now, where you're kind of at out now with your portfolio.
Yeah. That was about 2013. And, just kind of bringing you up to where I am now, that was 8 years ago. So it wasn't that long ago. It seems like just yesterday. But I've also been in this very, I've been kind of a hesitant social media personality, right? When it comes to
Yeah.
real estate. And I really struggled with, how do I say the words to people? Real estate has made me a multi-millionaire without seeming pompous or arrogant, without being a target on my back. And
Yeah.
really, for me, my story and the fact that I know I can help so many people, because I really did have nothing. And then I had a point where we had negative hundreds of thousand net worth, and I
Hmm.
still was able to figure out. I want to encourage people so much that real estate truly is the greatest wealth creator, wealth builder, and wealth sustainer that I've ever seen in 25 years of investments, that it's worth it to me to be real and to share the numbers and the values and the struggles and how long it took, because it takes a long time, but the
Yeah.
rewards are so worth it, right? So just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Um, 2013, I think we were up to 16 to 20 units that we owned, right?
Hmm.
Went to the banks and they started saying yes. So at that point, I created a 5-year plan. And I said, if I can just buy 16 units a year for
Okay.
5 years, I would have enough units that I could retire in 5 years with a nice six-figure income, completely passively, plus have enough to pay all my own health insurance, take a big vacation every year, and pay for my kids to be in Christian school. So that
Hmm.
was my goal. So, and we had not only to create that passive income, but to pay off the several $100,000 of debt that we had, that we started in '07. So it
Yeah.
took me longer, because not only did I have to replace the income, but we had to pay off a debt from a business we really never should have started, because
Hmm.
we didn't know what we were doing, right? And that was a losing business ultimately. But it taught us a lot, right? So fast forward, I just started one rental at a time. I'm going to buy this many units, and then as soon as we basically quickly forced the appreciation. So we would take a 4-unit property, We would empty the units in about a year period, not renew leases, raise the rents, after fixing them up, and then we would cash out the equity, go use it as the down payment on the next one. And so we did a BRRRR method on 4-unit apartment buildings, and
Okay.
we just continue to buy, rehab, rent at the new values, pull out the refi proceeds and use it as the down payment. Took me 4 years instead of 5. At that point, once money was flowing, because I used equity to put it back into the properties, I was able to move much more quickly, right?
Hmm.
So, bought enough units I think at that point I was at like 60 units that my husband and I owned on our own without partners.
Okay.
And so at that point, I was like, okay, now we have what we need, but I want to save a year's salary before I quit. And that way, if I'm not bankable anymore, because I had already lived through not being bankable, right? If
Yeah.
I become not bankable again, because I've given up this job that has sustained me for 20 years, I want some money set aside. So I knew I'd look better to the lenders and I'd have some cushion. And I decided at that point, Peter, okay, now I wasn't even looking at net worth. I was
Yeah.
just looking at cash flow. I need
For
X number
sure.
of dollars for cash flow. And we didn't live on any of it. And I can't stress how important that is. The whole time we reinvested all the cash back into repairing the buildings, bringing them up
That's
to
huge.
speed, and only lived on our income. And so at the end, when I did retire, it was an easy transition to say, that job's income is out. Now we just live on this because everything else has been paid off, right?
Yeah.
So we did that, but I knew at that point I had to do a PFS because I decided I want to go for a larger commercial multi-unit, not these
Okay.
4-unit buildings anymore, but I want a larger one. And the bank, because I wasn't using my little small traditional bank, asked me for a PFS. I was like, I've never had to do a PFS before. So I
Yeah.
did my PFS and I was like, oh my gosh, we have more than $1 million net worth. How
Right.
did that happen? How did that happen? I had no idea because I
Yeah. Yeah.
wasn't even focusing on that. I was just enough buildings to build the cash flow to get where we were. And when I realized how much equity I still had in my buildings and net worth, I knew I can step it up and start buying bigger buildings. So I created this plan I'm going to leave the full-time job, but that desire to be home with my kids, I didn't really succeed in that. They were all in school by the time I was able to leave AIG. And so they were. And I said, what
Oh,
am I
okay.
going to do with my day hours now? So what will I do while they're in school from 8 to 3 every day? Well, I want to make a bigger impact. I want to buy bigger buildings. I want to create legacy wealth now. So I
Hmm.
decided to start buying larger multifamily buildings at that point, did a couple of joint ventures, and then knew, okay, I'm going to do full-time, multifamily operations. And then I started buying, bigger and bigger apartment buildings from 2018 until today. So it's been about 3 years.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Any partners on that, on buying bigger multifamily, or is it just you and your husband?
Yeah, so I've done about 240 or 250 units of joint ventures where I just own local apartment buildings with 2 other partners. Those are here in central Pennsylvania. And then my company, Greater Purpose Capital, I partner with other operators that I know, like, and trust in specific markets that I'm not in, but that I know and I like a lot. So we invest in Atlanta, Georgia market. I've had 3 big complexes there, and in the Houston, Texas market primarily. And so
Okay.
those are through one deal at a time, joint venture syndication property opportunities.
Gotcha. And did your husband, was he always the chiropractor throughout this whole time? And then, yeah. Okay.
Yes. So my husband, I mean, he gets a lot of credit. So I am like, he's not the business mind, the entrepreneur guy. He's a great doctor and he
Hmm.
loves working with his hands.
Yeah.
I'm like, I like the numbers and the financial piece, and this is the business plan and how I'm going to make it worth a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
I like people, and I'm good with the contract and the legal and the banking and all of that. But I don't want to be in the apartments painting and all the stuff I had to do early. So
Yeah.
he was very involved in our own holdings to handle the property management piece.
Okay.
General contracted our property flips and rehabs. We still flipped a few properties. I'll never do it again, but we still flipped a few properties until a couple years ago. So he's very involved in that, but he's not involved in any of the apartment syndication or joint venture stuff. It's just not where his passion is. So he finally retired from his practice at the
Okay.
end of May of this year.
Oh,
So we are
nice.
now both full-time in real estate, We're growing slowly our own portfolio of smaller multifamily rentals and also luxury high-end vacation rentals. So we're pretty big into investing in luxury vacation rentals as well. And so he's really overseeing the asset management and property management of our family holdings
Okay.
while I go out and work on joint ventures and syndications.
Nice. And all those are they short-term rentals, and are they in Pennsylvania as well?
So I have a really nice mountain lake rental in Pennsylvania. I've had three in Ocean City, Maryland, at the beach, and we have one now in Navarre, Florida, between Pensacola and Destin. And we're now really focused on buying more in Florida.
Oh, nice. Okay. All right. Um, and what do you guys see? I mean, I know there's not a ton of parallels between multifamily and short-term rentals, but what have you guys experienced with the short-term rentals transitioning to some of those for those luxury high-end short-term rentals? How do those go, and how have you been able to accomplish that, even outside your own state?
Yeah, so I'll say this. There is some overlap. So for some of my apartment complexes, we actually short-term rent some of our units because
Okay.
we're in an area that really is in high demand for short-term rentals. We have Hershey Park, for example. We have a children's research cancer center. We have a strong, hospital system where people are there quite often. And Hershey as a town doesn't allow short-term rentals. So I'm
Mm,
really surrounding that town and I can short-term rental some of our apartment units. And we actually make, 3 or 4 times as much as we would having a long-term tenant in that unit. And so we
okay.
have several within our unit. So we kind of dabbled in doing it there while I was also buying, vacation rentals. But for me, the vacation rentals were two things. It started as just forced family time. Really, what can we buy that isn't just a waste of money, that's not just a luxury item, that pays for itself, that we can enjoy and force ourselves to go on vacation and take a break because we
Yeah.
worked 70-hour weeks for years, right?
Hmm.
So our first vacation rental, it was just like, let me make sure it covers our expenses and pays for 2 or 3 weeks at the beach every year.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was great. And then it made a lot more than that. So I was like, okay, let's buy another one that we're not going to use and use it as a profit center. So I think just putting on my hat of working with investors and investments for so long, I don't look at real estate as this is one niche and only that niche is good. Like I look at real estate as buying an income stream or
Hmm.
buying appreciation and growth or buying something that's going to help me sustain my income. So most of us go through our life and our business with three phases. We're like, first, we need to meet our income goals. Then we have some money that we can, once our income goals are met, everything extra we can afford to put into something longer term that's going to have growth and appreciation, even though it might not pay us a lot of cash flow today. And then we have this other income
Yeah.
bucket that's like, now let's preserve everything we've worked so hard for. So what I saw was that while I had a couple of vacation rentals, when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden there was this big threat to our income as multifamily
Yeah.
investors. It's like, there was an eviction moratorium and I had 900 to 1,000 units at the time that I was asset managing that were like, are we going to be able to pay our mortgage and pay our
Yeah.
expenses? Are our tenants going to pay? And we didn't know. So I didn't want to, grow my exposure to more multifamily investments. I wanted to
Yeah.
hold on to a lot of cash to make sure we could cover our expenses, continue to pay our investors and our mortgage. But at the same time, I had all of my cash flow needs met by my own personal holdings. And then I had the syndications, but I had some money set aside because I thought we were heading toward a recession at the end of 2019. So I sold a
Hmm.
bunch. I have some dry powder to be able to buy when I thought we would hit a recession. And at the same time, because of the pandemic, the vacation rental market was hit really, really hard. So a
Yeah.
lot of people were forced to sell. And a
Yeah.
lot of doctors and attorneys and business owners who had these luxury second homes that their businesses were shut down. They had a primary mortgage, they had a second mortgage, and now the renters weren't coming to, rent from them. Suddenly they were distressed and needed to sell. So I noticed that while there isn't a lot of opportunity in multifamily that doesn't come with this additional risk of people not paying that I was already having to navigate, over hundreds of units.
Yeah.
There were real opportunities in some of these luxury rentals dropping and having very motivated sellers. So I said, like Warren Buffett, you buy when people are fearful and you
Yeah.
sell when people are greedy. And I said, people are afraid. Some of these really nice properties have really gone down in value. And I scooped up a couple because I saw the opportunity. I didn't need the cash right now. These were my growth properties. And so I said, I'm going to buy them low. I've got this potential for the rental market to rebound, the values to really go up, and it added diversification to all of my properties that required a lot of management during the pandemic, but had a lot of income. So it was a diversification and an opportunity play for me. And really, it all comes down to, what are you buying it at? What's it going to be worth in the future? How do you make it worth more? And how do you collect more rental income? There are just more
Yep.
people renting it in short term than there are in apartments, but the fundamentals are very much the same.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, so over the years you've had, I mean, you set up a goal of 5 years, to be able to buy 16 units each year, and then you cut it off, and end up getting to that point in 4 years. What is, your and your husband's goal from now, 2020 26? Do you guys have something set up?
Yes. So I'm really glad you asked me that question. I'm going to tell you something that's a little unconventional, right? My financial goals are no longer, I want X number of doors or X number of dollars per month. Um, our financial goals are met. By the grace of God, we have true financial freedom. We've developed, real wealth that if we never did another deal in our lives, we would be okay, right? And we'd still have some stuff to pass on to our kids. So for me to get up and buy more doors every day, um, I say no to a lot of really good deals and
Hmm.
yes, only to really great deals. It's gotta be a really good deal financially. It's gotta be worth the time commitment that I have to put in, right? So in the beginning,
Yeah.
my story was 70 to 80 hours a week for a decade, to create financial freedom. And, I've only got so many years left with my kiddos. And now that I have that financial freedom, which I developed so that I could have time freedom with them, my goals are create experience. We traveled 6 weeks this summer,
Oh,
and
yeah.
we go and visit our short-term rentals and we stay there. So, we're going for a week or two in Florida, a week or two at the lake, a week or two at the beach. And we did those things so that we would have lifestyle and create memories and help our kids really get a sense of, let's pour into them over this next 8 years, teach them financial literacy, teach them how to buy wise investments, and to create their life and their investments to feed the kind of life they want to live, right? So
Yeah.
for me, I truly don't have a financial goal that says I need to buy X number of doors in the next couple of years. I just don't anymore. I say, I want to impact the most lives that I can. I
Okay.
wanna buy really great deals to bring to my investors, because 'cause I've worked with investors for years, right?
Yeah.
That I know are going to have income, growth, and they're going to preserve capital. They're gonna provide strong risk-adjusted returns.
Yeah.
Um, and I want to buy properties where we're really going in and impacting the lives of our residents as well. So I'm really more into buying joint venture deals where we hold the deals a little longer. We go in and teach our residents financial literacy and, how to get out of the rat race and how to buy their own properties and create time freedom through wise financial decisions that allows them to, elevate and be brought up and hopefully move out of our apartments,
Yeah.
and create their own. So I'm really into doing deals that create an impact,
Hmm.
while creating strong returns with people that I really like that have that same like purposeful investing for impact. And that's why I created Greater Purpose Capital. It really was to be able to buy investments for a greater purpose than just having more units or having more money. That comes as an outflow of doing good and doing good deals with good people. But that's
Yeah.
my goal, is continue to grow legacy wealth that has a greater impact, however many units that looks like, whether it's all multifamily or some mobile homes or some vacation rentals. I'm open for opportunity that feels good.
Nice, nice. That's good. I mean, I know a lot of people end up, at some points shifting to, a certain aspect of real estate or, certain things to give back, and that's huge. And I know that,
Mhm.
that's a huge driver too from,
Yeah,
speaking about why earlier and everything else. I know a lot of people, take that as their why. So that's
yeah,
huge.
yeah.
So, um, Anna, we're going to transition just a little bit. I had a couple of, final questions before we get you out of here. For you, is there a book that's helped you? I mean, I know you mentioned, I've heard of it before, but you mentioned the book before. So was there a book that's really, influenced your life, and maybe it was the one that you mentioned earlier?
Sure. While Multifamily Millions was really good for learning multifamily and how you really can create wealth long term through multifamily, I'd say the book that made me really kind of shift my perspective a few years ago was a book called Life in Air.
Oh yeah.
And Life in Air, it's really kind of a novel form, but it's a very impactful book that helps you to really think about your life and whether you are creating your business to fuel your financial goals, but at the expense of the things that you say are really important to you, like your
Hmm.
health and your time with your spouse and your time with your kids and your spiritual health. Or am I really purposefully, intentionally building my business and building my investments in a way that serve what's most important to me? So
Yeah.
it helped me to really think about, is the time that I spend every day congruent with what I'm saying is most important to me? And am I pursuing financial freedom at the same time that I'm pursuing balance and joy? Or am I kind of a slave to the pursuit of financial freedom, right?
Yeah.
At the expense of everything that's important to me. That
Yeah.
book, my heart was already there. I had worked so hard to build what I wanted, and I knew we needed more time, quality and quantity time with our family and experiences. But it's hard to figure out how to do that. And so reading that book made me really go, okay, from here on out, when I leave the corporate world almost 3 years ago, everything I do is going to be done with purpose. And I'm going to make sure that I spend as much time blocked on my calendar every day for those things that really are important to me. And I only do deals with the amount of time I have left after I've taken care of all the things that are most important.
Yeah. No, that's huge. I've heard of that book. I haven't got it yet, so I need to get that book. I hear that a lot, especially on Bigger Pockets podcast.
Yes.
For you guys having all these units, is there a app or an online resource that you guys use a lot to either help property manage or, make the business flow a little bit easier?
Yeah, I use so many now, right? I'm always finding new apps and new things that we really like. One thing that's really made communication easier, especially with partners in different areas of the country, is Slack. It's an
Yes.
app basically for communication. So we have different Slack chats where we can, talk about, this is our capital raise channel. And so all of us that are raising capital together, we can communicate with where we are and where we are with investors. And when we're dealing with cost seg, we're like, okay, this is where we go to say, here's where we are in the cost seg, here's how much it's going to be. And so instead of just using text and your texts get buried and your emails get buried, like you have a centralized place where you can communicate with your entire team on what needs to be done for every aspect of your investing. So Slack's something that I'm really enjoying right now.
Yeah, Slack's huge. Yeah, yeah, we use that too for my real estate agent side. So yeah, that's very good. Um, and where can people find out more about you?
Great. So you can follow me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Instagram at Anna REI Kelley. And my website is greaterpurposecapital.com, where you can find out more about our apartment syndications and investing for meaningful impact.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Well, is there anything else that I missed? Maybe didn't ask a question that you want to cover before we get out of here?
I can't think of anything. I would just, encourage you and your listeners to really take some time and think about, whether you're purposefully pursuing investments to serve your life goals and your personal, relational, spiritual, and health goals, or whether you're doing deals just to do deals. And if it's the latter, take some time to think about how can you build your business in a way strategically that really serves the life that you want to live and the purpose that you want to live for.
Yeah. No, no, that's really good advice. Really good advice. Well,
Thank you.
I really appreciate your time coming on and giving a little bit of how you were able to build your wealth. Honestly, in a very young age, and also get out of your W-2. That's huge.
Yes, thank you so much. It was my joy and privilege to be here, Peter.
Thank you so much.